In the past, video games have often been referred to as a highly violent means of entertainment, their content being deemed inappropriate for children and for people who are faint of heart. While this generalization is not all true, there are some gaming titles who have gained notoriety for their bloody content, and today's video is dedicated especially to the goriest video games on the market. Harvester is a bizarre mid-90s point-and-click adventure game that created quite a fuss when it was first released, players and critics alike being totally baffled by the huge amount of gore it featured. With a mishmash of a storyline and a million nonsensical scenes packed into its gameplay, this crazily bloody video game gained a solid cult following in the recent years, the over-the-top violence that it features being its most well-known trait. The Sniper Elite series is renowned for its exquisite attention to detail, the in-depth scenes where you can closely observe how a bullet is shattering different parts of your enemy's anatomy being of worldwide notoriety. Even though it does not shower its players with gory scenes every 2 seconds, Sniper Elite 4 compensates by rendering those bloody moments in the most qualitative of ways, each and every torn muscle tissue having a highly realistic look. There's no doubt that each and every installment from the Gears of War series has its fair share of blood and gore, but the infamous episode that takes place inside a giant worm from Gears of War 2 is by far the grossest and most disturbing one of the entire panoply of gaming titles that make up the franchise. Having to practically swim through pools of blood and innards would definitely take a toll on every player, these scenes haunting them long after they finish the game. Experiencing the cornucopia of gore and guts that is featured in all of the Resident Evil games in VR is possibly the most intense and blood-curdling of experiences, the utter amount of detail you get to see up close being simply disheartening. BIOHAZARD is the freshest Resident Evil title, and it not only brings a lot of novelties in terms of upgraded graphics, but it also capitalizes on the idea of pure horror exploration and survival that could leave you with some serious traumas after finishing the game. BULLETSTORM is full of exaggerated violence from start to finish, players being richly rewarded when they manage to take out their enemies in the most imaginative and bloody ways possible. A shot through the testicles, burning the flesh off someone's bones, or firing an explosive round up one of your enemy's backsides being just a pale sample of what this crazy game has to offer. BULLETSTORM is so packed with madness that it doesn't even care that someone might get offended. The Evil Within is the live example that gore can have no limits when it's represented in video games. The extraordinary abundance of blood-soaked scenes and literally explosive executions that take place throughout the game standing as proof of this. With this utterly violent third-person survival horror, director Shinji Mikami showed us that he can best himself when it comes to grotesque monsters and bloody combats and create an even more sickening game than his staple Resident Evil titles. The first Manhunt game is known as the absolute example of a video game that parents are afraid of letting their kids play, and after the immense amount of controversy that surrounded it, you'd think that a sequel would be totally out of the question. Well, Manhunt 2 happened, and it was an even more outrageous gaming title, characterised by an increased amount of brutal and horrific deaths and an overall taste for blood, gore and intense violence. A remake of the original 1988 beat-em-up title, Splatterhouse 2010 takes all the graphical violence from its parent and increases it twofold, the sole goal of this game being to win the first prize for the bloodiest game on the market. The gameplay is simplified to the maximum, and all you have to do is kill an unhealthy amount of creatures either with your bare hands or with a machete, the result being the same, gallons of blood splattered all over the screen. Dead Space and its sequel are indispensable entries on the goriest games list, the necromorphs being the flesh and bone description of the very word gore. Besides these already disgusting creatures, this gaming title really knows how to put an emphasis on deaths, both the hero and the villains being subjected to some of the most graphical ways of kicking the bucket, all of them including but not limited to brains being scattered around, limbs being severed and entire bodies exploding. At first glance, Soldier of Fortune 2 might look like your average first-person shooter game, but it's only when you start to really damage your opponent that you realise its amazing potential of turning into one of the goriest video games ever. Double HELIX is so outrageous that it allows its players to indulge in their sadistic side and shoot off the body parts of their enemies, each gun having its unique way of inflicting damage and creating some of the most spectacular bloodbaths in the history of gaming. Mortal Kombat has always been known as a franchise that greatly values its spectacular ways of being killed, but with the 2015 X installment, things were put under a new light. The technological advancements made it possible to develop a more high-definition rendering of all these unsettling executions that are universally known as fatalities. With these being said, Mortal Kombat X is proudly occupying an honourable spot on our list. This is our video featuring 11 of the goriest video games ever produced. Make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons because it helps us immensely, and why not leave a comment down below whilst you're at it. You can also check out GameBite.com for even more from the world of gaming, but until next time, thanks for watching and have a great day.